last night. That's supposed to be a dot inside of a circle. How old? Not how old am I, but how old is the Earth? How do you date the age of the Earth? We've talked a lot about this. Well, here's a cute one I kind of got a kick out of. In the uranium decay process, there's an element called polonium. Polonium decays fairly quickly, and it leaves little round rings. In fact, this is a picture of a uranium decay here. This is a picture of the polonium decay. It's probably hard for you to see, but they're oval. Now, there's a problem with that. They're oval and circular mixed together. If they were all oval, it wouldn't be a problem, but for the evolutionists, there's a problem that the two are mixed together. Because its half-life is so short, it's completely gone in less than 4 years. Half-life calculations are pretty easy to do, but polonium completely degrades in less than 4 years. Well, you know what that means when there's a mixture of oval and circular? In a tree, for example, and these are in trees, that means that the tree completely was deformed in less than 4 years. It's sort of like this. If this is a tree, this is a polonium ring, and I tried to make that, but as I squish it, I hope it doesn't blow up my face, it becomes oval. As it gets compressed, it no longer is a circle. It's oval. So the tree was compressed while this thing was decaying, because there's a mixture of oval and circular. There's only one thing that could cause that, a very catastrophic event. You have to understand the evolution position. The evolution position is based on uniformity. It's called, in fact, the theory of uniformitarianism. It's totally uniform. Nothing happened fast, nothing happened quickly, nothing happened suddenly. The original theory of evolution was based on this concept of long, slow ages occurring over a long period of time. Nothing catastrophic. That's been somewhat modified. They've had to, evolutionists now say, well, there had to be apparently a catastrophic event somewhere. But it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle because these same logs that have these oval and round halos mixed in them are in things that are supposed to be millions, hundreds of millions of years old. And the process that evolutionists have thought for decades is that it takes hundreds of millions of years to form this coal or these fossilized trees. The very existence of 4 years, the very existence of a mixture of circular polonium halos or decayed element halos with the oblong ones or oval ones is living testimony to the fact that it didn't take hundreds of millions of years to form. Once again, what's the point of all this? Once again, an observation in science can be best described by the biblical model. All of life is looked at through two models. You either look at it through a biblical lens where God acted and the Bible describes what God did, or you look at it through a worldview where there is no God and everything happened by accident. And once again, Isabella is paying very close attention. Alex is asleep this time. Isabella's watching me very closely. Rachel's asleep too, I guess. But once again, the Bible model fits the data. That's what science is all about. First off, you can't prove anything in the past scientifically. You can only prove the past by inference or with a written document of the one who did it. Well, evolutionists have no written document, and all of their inferences are out of whack with what's seen. The best inference for scientific inference is that this tree, if this is a tree instead of a balloon, this tree formed within 4-year period, it formed a coalified or fossilized trunk, not hundreds of millions of years. And on top of that, you and I have a book, a record of the research done. When I started research 31 years ago, for the Army actually, it was required that everything that I did during the day was written down in a book and signed by my supervisor. My name and his signature went on it to verify that it was true, so that years and years and years later they can go back to the Bethany Research Lab and see the work that I did when I was a research physicist working with the Army at that time. Then I went to the Navy after. But when I worked with the Army, my books are still there with my name and my boss's name, Dr. Rolf Wagner, the Nazi officer that I told you about. Their name, my name, and his name are right there in that book to verify it. Well, God put his name in his book, and he verifies it, and everything that he says is true, and everything that we see supports what he says. Think about that. So here's another case where what you observe in science matches the Bible far better than it matches the evolutionary philosophy of no God. Thank you. As old as a rock. Well, how old is a rock? You hear that as a joke. Come on. Marvels of electronics. Is it working now? No. No. Okay, well, anyways. As old as a rock. Start again. Yeah, this rock cannot talk to you. A geologist will say, depending on where they find the rock, that it's perhaps Precambrian rock, and therefore 300 or 400 million years old, or whatever. They'll identify the age of a rock by the layer that they find it in, but then they identify the age of the layer they find it in by the rock itself. It's kind of a circular thing, circular reasoning, if you will. And what kicked me off on this one is there's a geologist here that wrote an article in the last Creation magazine, get his name to give him credit, Jim Farquhar. Jim Farquhar is a geologist, works for a mining company. And he points out that there are geologists that will tell you that if you don't have the evolutionary time scale on things, it would hurt geology. And he says that's not true, first off. He said you don't have to call this a Precambrian rock. You could call this a pre-flood rock. You could call it a mid-flood rock, because we know a lot of rocks were formed during the flood. You could call it a post-flood rock. You could even call it an early post-flood rock. And it wouldn't affect one tiny iota of their mining operations. They happen to know that in what the world calls Precambrian rocks, they will find iron ore. So they look for these Precambrian rocks. These rocks could just as easily have been labeled pre-flood rocks, and they would look for the pre-flood rocks. And once again, Isabella is watching me intently. I think that is so cute. The rest of you should try that. This is But he goes to point out a rock can only be dated by the biases of the scientists doing it. See, science relies on measurement. You can measure the mass of the rock. You can measure the terminal velocity when it hits the floor. It's fairly hard rock. You can measure the volume of the rock. You cannot measure the age of the rock. The age is an inference. Science depends on what you can see or measure, repeating it, and then being able to describe it mathematically. That's not dating this rock. It's not science. It's an inference. You're inferring about the past. And you're going to hear, especially if you're a student and you take geology in high school or college, you're going to be told over and over that evolution is the foundation upon which is built the science of geology, and that is pure hogwash. As Dr. Farquhar says, and quotes so eloquently, you could just as well label these flood rocks as Precambrian. Makes no difference how you label them. What matters is what's in them if you're a geologist, if you're a miner. And bear in mind that when you watch the Discovery Channel or the Learning Channel or the Geographic Channel, what you're going to be told is nothing but somebody's opinion. You cannot measure scientifically the age of a rock. It's not possible. It's only an inference based on opinion. You have biases. You know that the whole world is 4.5 billion years old. You've assumed that already, so therefore you try to fit your rocks into that time frame. If you're a creation scientist, then you know the world is only 7,000 to 10,000 years old at tops, so then you fit your schedule into that schedule. Your aging into that schedule has no effect on the science of geology whatsoever. The bottom line of this creation moment is you don't know how old rocks are. Nobody does. When science tries to identify the age of a rock, they're using opinions and biases, and it does not matter. You're going to be told, every science book you pick up, from now to the end of college, you're going to be told in certain fields anyway that evolution is the foundation upon which science is built. That is pure baloney. Actually, creation is the foundation on which science was built. Before creationists decided that the world must be structured and orderly, the worldly scientists believed there was no sense to study science because it was all haphazard. So don't ever be duped by the lies of the world. Creation science is real science. Thank you. Recently, one day this week, I was sitting at Joe Trosner's getting my car repaired, or somebody's car repaired, and maintaining a bunch of cars. And I was reading the Portland Press Herald. There's been a recent scientific discovery, kind of interesting. A chunk of rock from outer space, meteor, or meteorite, a little piece of space rock, a couple pieces, they found traces of sugar. For those of you that are chemically astute, that's C6H12O6, and they found traces of an amino acid, a basic amino acid that's got nitrogen in it. And they're all excited. Why are they all excited? They're all excited because this fills in a gap. It explains a missing gap. Well, interestingly enough, everybody that takes junior high chemistry, science rather, 7th and 8th grade science, and everybody just about that takes biology in high school is familiar with the Stanley Miller experiment. How many of you here have heard of the Stanley Miller experiment? Okay, Don has. My son hasn't. You were awake, right, in school. That's, okay. Anyway, Stanley Miller made some basic assumptions, and in a closed environment in which he bombarded with very high energy, he created an amino acid. And it was touted, and is touted, as the way that amino acid is the building block of life. It's the building block of your protein, for example. Most basic protein has 400 amino acids lined up in a specific way. And he touted that as, well, this is where life came from. The problem is that every scientist knows that isn't where life came from, because the assumptions Stanley Miller made were all wrong. It was not a reducing environment on Earth, and nobody thinks, because nobody was here 4.5 billion years ago, but nobody thinks it was a reducing. They think it was an oxidizing or a carbon dioxide environment. Very different environment. So Stanley Miller's experiment is totally kaput. So now they're saying, how exciting. We filled in the gap, but none of you knew there was a gap, did you? They don't teach in science that there is a gap. Well, now, there's a molecule called DNA. DNA is it's your library.
It's also sugar. It's also a sugar.
Well, it has sugar in it, and some phosphates and other things. But DNA is your library. The reason that, well, just look around you, the reason that Brother Phil looks like he does, it's not his fault, it's his DNA. The reason I look like I do, it's not my fault, it's my DNA, and so is Charlie's. His red hair has been programmed in his DNA. Watson and Crick are the first people to map out DNA. Crick knew the idea of DNA developing by itself was ludicrous. So he invented a theory, check me out, it's called panspermia, that life came from outer space. And sure enough, now scientists, after having laughed at poor old Dr. Crick for a while, are jumping up and down, according to the Portland Press Herald, jumping up and down and are excited about the fact that a rock from outer space had sugar and amino acid. Here we have it now, the building block of life. What was missing, although you didn't know it was missing, is now here. Life came from outer space. Now, there's still a problem. If it couldn't evolve here, how could it evolve out there? And did those rocks really come from outer space? Or did they come from, as scientists would say, did they come from a meteor impact on the earth, or during the flood? We look like Father Phil here. He's going to... You'll see what I mean when he stands up. So I think it's kind of interesting. It's fun. Science is a fun profession. But as you read things in the paper, if you start to read with more of a critical mind than just accepting it, stop to think about what's being said. Here was given to me a beautiful creation moment by a couple of scientists that are all excited about the fact they filled in the missing gaps. And the first thing that popped into my mind was, wait a minute, there's not a kid in the United States of America that is being educated in the government-controlled schools, that's your public school system, that has ever been taught there was a missing gap. Were you ever taught there was a missing gap? No. Well, there is. And now they're happy. They found what it is. It's from outer space. But it still just pushes everything back, doesn't it? I'm going to leave you with this. I believe that life came from outer space. I believe that life came, just as the Bible said, created by God, who lives everywhere, including outer space. God is not limited in where he lives. The Bible, once again, is right on the money when it says that God said, and it was. Now scientists are finally agreeing, in a way, life came from outer space. Exactly, came from God. Because it couldn't have happened here by accident. Interesting. So think about that. If you can pick up the papers, last Tuesdays or Wednesdays or Thursdays, I forget, one of those. No, it wouldn't be Wednesdays. Wouldn't be Wednesdays, probably Tuesday or Thursday. But if you can find that Portland Press Herald, I was going to take it, but it was Joe's. I didn't want to run off with Joe's newspaper. But it just struck me, really struck me, the missing gap. But no one's told there's a missing gap. But there is. In evolution teaching, there's a tremendous missing gap. Because none of this stuff could happen by accident. And you know the truth. You were designed by God, who lives everywhere, including outer space. Thank you. Family photograph here. Not my family. But this is a picture of an incredible creature. Oops, I gave it away there. Do you know what this is? If you hadn't, no, you've all seen the name anyway. Bummer. This is an ant. I don't mean Aunt Betty. It's a real ant. And what's remarkable about the ant is I have noticed, I never gave a whole lot of thought to this until I read this article, but have you noticed that an ant can find a grain of sugar in your house even if it lives half a mile away, it seems like, and once he's found your honey jar, there will be a parade of ants following a line. Last summer, we have a big oak tree in the corner of our driveway, quite good size, and we had these great big black carpenter ants all running around the kitchen, carrying things off. It got real bad when two of them walked off with my whole sugar jar. Followed the ant trail out the door, down the side of the house, across the lawn to the base of the oak tree. Dug up and found a nest there. Then able to follow a path. How do ants do that? Well, that's what's kind of miraculous about them. There is no way that you could evolve this kind of technique. What they do is they deposit a chemical, it's a pheromone, get this here, pheromone. They deposit a chemical, a pheromone. something that has an odor to it. It's also something that evaporates. So as an ant walks along, in the morning they wake up, they go out and they say, let's go foraging for stuff. They walk out across the grass in a variety of directions. The first one to find something picks it up, takes it back home. Now he's left a double trail of this chemical that they're able to sense. And since ants have put into them, designed by God in them, the desire to follow this pheromone trail, this chemical trail, they will follow the trail with the highest odor, the strongest odor. What's interesting is you say, well, what if somebody, an ant from a longer distance, gets back first because the other guy got sidetracked doing something? Well, because it's volatile, it has a tendency to evaporate. So the bottom line is that always, 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 the ant goes on the shortest trail in the long term. As things progress, the ant will always follow the shortest trail. Well, so what? Well, what's interesting to me, there's an article, and I didn't pull the Scientific American out, but they reference an article in Scientific American, and the article is entitled Swarm Smarts. Computer scientists studying the ant methodology have actually started developing software to solve rerouting traffic problems in their networks. So they are using, in Scientific American, an article written by two scientists that are evolutionists, admit that the ants are able to solve these rerouting problems in their communications networks far better than they could. So they are copying the ant. They are doing something similar. I don't know exactly what. I did not read that Scientific American article. But they are doing something very similar to what the ants are doing in their rerouting, because they sense a logic to it. There is logic there. That is an incredibly logical system. Human beings get lost very easily. In fact, I heard a story, you know why Jesus had to be born in a manger, why there was no room for him at the inn. They arrived late because Joseph refused to stop and ask for directions. He got lost. That was a joke, I have to tell you. But what an incredible design. Think about this, these little ants, little itsy-bitsy, actually my carpenter ants were not little itsy-bitsy, they were quite good size. You could shoot them with a .22, I think. These little ants are able to always, as a colony, send all of their workers. You ever see Bug's Life? Any of you that saw the cute little movie Bug's Life? It was kind of cute. Send all of their workers along the proper path because of the design system that God put into them. And we are so aware of that as scientists, that computer scientists are using the same technique in their circuitry, in their design, in their software design, in computers. That's an awesome thing, if you think about it. The other thing that's pretty awesome is they show pictures here of an ant that exists today and an ant that is guessed to be millions of years old. He's in amber, that is millions of years old. Hasn't changed. Little tiny ant hasn't changed. He hasn't evolved from a protozoa to an ant. He was an ant millions of years ago. He's still an ant. Of course, I don't believe that we were here millions of years ago, but he was an ant in the very beginning, and he's still an ant. We were people in the very beginning, and we're still people. Well, think about the ant. Think about this incredible critter. The next time, next summer, when you run out your dooryard and start stomping all over them, think about, and I did, I wasn't kind. I destroyed the nest in the oak tree, and they went away. I never had a problem after that. But think about what an incredible design this little guy is. And I didn't even touch upon the fact that they can carry, it mentions in the article, they can carry food that is 20 times their weight. Can you carry something 20 times your weight? Think about that. I weigh about 200 something. So if I'd be stronger than a Cat D8 bulldozer if I could carry 20 times my weight. They do. And they always find the shortest way as a colony. And they use it. Think about that. What an awesome God we serve. What an awesome creator he is. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I have to turn my power on. Fly. How do you fly? How does a fly fly? You know, engineers and scientists have been building aero machines for some time. They're lighter than air machines, but most of the aircraft that we have today, except for the blimps that hover over the football games and give us nice pictures of the Patriots defeating everybody and things like that. Most of the other aircraft are heavier than air, and it's kind of complicated how they fly. Well, how does a fly fly? I thought this was fascinating. In Nature magazine, on the 16th of August in the year 2001, on page 688, if you want to go look at it, you can see it at UNE, at the library, or at USM, at the library. Scientists are puzzled over how flies fly. For a long time, they figured flies couldn't fly. That it's impossible for flies to fly the way they are designed. They've said that about bumblebees for a long time, but flies too. I didn't realize that, but they also considered flies as being unable to fly. Well, they came up with an idea that perhaps flies fly because they have these little wings on them, and they create a vortex. You know, like in Dorothy and Toto, in what was that, Wizard of Oz, where the whole house got picked up and sucked up and landed. Isabella is actually smiling. She, I think she thinks I'm funny. Not what I'm saying, she's just looking at me, but anyway. And they thought flies flew that way. That a fly flew by, that's no pun intended there, but by creating this little vortex and the whole fly got sucked up. And now they've discovered, no, using computer modeling, that's not true. It seems what a fly does, they think now, with each of their little wings. And do you ever try to catch a fly, by the way? Very difficult thing to do, and I do not believe the Karate Kid was ever able to catch a fly with chopsticks. I was at my son is married to a Vietnamese girl, and we had a birthday party for him yesterday in Rhode Island, and all of the Vietnamese family came, and out came this big basket of chopsticks. And I'm telling you, chopsticks are not easy to use, number one, and I still do not believe that he was ever able to catch a fly with a chopstick. Remember the movies? You ever see Karate Kid? When he finally caught the fly with the chopsticks, he's now ready to defeat everybody on earth, right? Well, anyway, these little wings create little miniature tornadoes on top of each wing, and that creates a negative pressure. We know heavier than aircraft fly by creating negative pressure by the design of the wing, known that for years. But flies do it differently, and if you see these funny movies of the old days when people tried to design flying machine with wings flapping and the thing just collapses on the guy's head, well, by flapping their wings, they create these little itsy-bitsy teeny tornadoes on the wing top, creating a low-pressure area which allows it to fly. They are still very puzzled by it. It is incredibly sophisticated. We are trying. Why are we studying flies? Because evolutionary scientists who believe there is no God have decided that whoever it was that designed the fly knows an awful lot more about flight than they do. If they can match flies' flight in even small proportions, we could have an incredibly different type of aircraft. Think about it. Pretty astounding. So think about the simple little fly. By the laws of science, it shouldn't be able to do what it does. We are just now, with our computer modeling techniques, I have a couple of budding electrical engineer here and an electrical engineer here that have studied science, and just now beginning to be able to figure out how a fly does what he does. And it's incredible. Totally impossible for that type of thing to happen by accident. You cannot build an airplane by exploding a dumpster anywhere. It doesn't happen that way. It has to be designed. So when you look at the world around you, think about the incredible design of things. Look at a little fly, and instead of swatting him, watch him and think about the little miracle that's going on with his wings. He is a complex creature. designed by a complex designer far more intelligent than we are. Once again, the world around us screams, as it says in Romans chapter 1, screams the existence, the power, and the beauty of God to us. And evolutionists have a very hard time getting around that. Thank you. Back again to the ark. Ellen didn't know what this was. This is the ark. Not the Ark of the Covenant. This is Noah's ark. This is a scale model, for those of you that haven't seen it yet, a scale model of Noah's ark, 160:1, N gauge. This is the size of the ark. This is essentially the way the Bible describes what the ark looks like. It didn't have a cute little bow. And this is an N gauge train. So this gives you some idea of the size of the ark. I know I've shown you this before. And this is the wrong kind of dinosaur. But this is a dinosaur. The whole issue is, as a Christian, or as a Bible-believing person, we believe that, and the Jews believe this also, and they're not Christians, that's why I corrected myself, as a Bible-believing, that dinosaurs were in the ark. Now this is a big dinosaur, and he's not the scale at all, and he still would fit in here. But were dinosaurs in the ark? Did man and dinosaur live together? The world would have you believe that's impossible because no human being could survive with a dinosaur. And in fact, if any of you have seen the movie Jurassic Park, and then the second one, The Return of Jurassic Park, or whatever it was, I don't know, I forgot the second one. But anyhow, in the movie Jurassic Park, they made it pretty clear that the most fearsome dinosaur there was T-Rex. And it was quite crystal clear. If you remember the lawyer that was sitting in the porta potty when T-Rex came along and squished him. He made it pretty clear that no human being could survive in the presence of T-Rex. Now, this is important. See, we believe T-Rex was in here. Perhaps small, but we believe T-Rex was in here. And we believe that T-Rex existed with people, and that because T-Rex was one of the living, breathing creatures at the time of the flood, he wound up in this box. Could that be possible? Isn't T-Rex a fearful, mighty killer hunter? Well, the answer is no. And this does not come, by the way, from a Christian. This comes from an evolutionist writing in a magazine, believe it or not, called Dinosaur Magazine. We have magazines for everything. There's a magazine called Dinosaur Magazine. Well, Dr. Horner, he's a paleontologist, he says that it's pretty clear that Tyrannosaurus Rex could not run. Doing computer simulations of the shape of the thigh bone versus the shin bone on T-Rex, he could not run. It's impossible for him to run. So right away now, in that movie Jurassic Park, when these two morons are driving a Jeep down the road at 85 miles an hour and T-Rex is coming right towards them, and you know that scene where you look in the mirror and the mirror says, objects in the rearview mirror are closer than they appear, and all he can see is a mouth like this coming right at him. Total fabrication and fantasy. Evolutionists themselves now believe T-Rex cannot run. At least Dr. Horner does, and he's a dinosaur expert. And he does it, and he believes that because of the weight of T-Rex and the shape of his thigh compared to his shins. And not only that, as he said, and this is a quote, it is a good thing T-Rex could not run, because with its spindly little arms, if T-Rex tripped, you would have, and this is a quote, tons of dinosaur crashing to the ground amidst snapping bones. T-Rex would never get up again. So what was T-Rex? They believe he was a scavenger. He has a tooth structure of a scavenger. We've known for some time the teeth in T-Rex are very, very shallowly embedded anyway. So Dr. Horner, who is an evolutionist, believes that T-Rex could not be a single tiny bit of a danger to a human being. Even I could outrun, apparently, T-Rex. Any of the Patriots could outrun T-Rex. They did pretty good last night. So is it possible for man to have existed with the dinosaurs? Absolutely yes. The most fearful dinosaur that the minds, the artificial fabrication of man that's ever put together is T-Rex. Made a movie about him called Jurassic Park. He was the star. It was all wrong. Evolutionists now believe it was all wrong. T-Rex, you had nothing to fear from. T-Rex had to worry about man. So did man and T-Rex exist in this boat? Yeah, they did. And T-Rex wouldn't have to be full size. If he was, he'd still fit in it. But he didn't have to be full size. He could have been much, much smaller. So once again, remember, when you're watching a Hollywood movie, none of the producers were there. And none of the producers of a movie made in Hollywood today would trust the record of the only one who was there. That's God. They reject the Bible and they reject what the Bible says. But we don't. So go back to your Bible. Go back to the word of truth. We were talking about that in the Sunday school. And what the Bible says is true. And if you wait long enough, the evolutionists themselves shoot themselves in the foot continuously. And what a blessing that is. Thank you. Anyone that studies biology, probably not at the high school level, maybe at the high school level, tardigrades, water bears. Tardigrades are a little creature. They've got a picture here of one of the tardigrades. They have a variety of shapes and sizes to them. This one is 3/10 of a millimeter long. It's called the water bear. This is a sketch of the water bear. Kind of a cute little guy in the sketch. Kind of an ugly thing when you look at the top of it. Tardigrades are kind of incredible. The water bear is kind of incredible. There's a problem here, and you'll see what it is when I start telling you about water bears. The whole idea, the whole basic presupposition of evolution is the survival of the fittest. That's what... Read it. Read The Origin of Species. I have. It won't shatter your faith. You'll wind up laughing when you're done. The whole point of Darwin's approach is the survival of the fittest. Therefore, you are what you are because you survived, because you were most fit to live in the environment that you're placed in. You got that? You cannot evolve based on survival of the fittest to live in an environment harsher than what you're living in. You can only match the environment you're living in. Well, let me read to you about the water bears. Okay, water bears have been frozen in liquid helium at minus 458 degrees Fahrenheit. For those of you that are intellectually impaired, it's 272 degrees centigrade. My son has been kidding me that we should use the metric system, and I said, of course not. Trained scientists have always used the what do we call our system? I don't even know what we call it. Whatever. Anyway, that's cold. Let me tell you, you could not be frozen to 458 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. You could not be frozen to 272 degrees below zero centigrade and survive. That's just a fraction above absolute zero. At the other extreme, they've been heated to 304 degrees Fahrenheit. And it doesn't bother them a tiny bit. That's hotter than boiling. You could not be placed in an oven at 304 degrees Fahrenheit unless you were a pizza. You would not come out a human being. They have been zapped with X-rays with an intensity 250 times stronger than that which would kill a human. 250 times of the radiation that would kill you, these little critters have been zapped by. It gets even more humorous. They've been able to extend pressures of 6,000 atmospheres. An atmosphere is about 15 pounds per square inch. 6,000 atmospheres. You would implode at that pressure. You could not. Not only that, they've gone from 6,000 atmospheres to 0 atmospheres like that. Scientists are just curious what happens to them. Divers get the bends going to about 10 atmospheres and coming up quickly. Nothing happens to them. They're perfectly fine. They wander around, they live on wet moss, and they just wiggle around and they keep walking. They're called water bears. The family is tardigrade. There are many others that don't look like this little water bear, but they all have the same characteristics. Every single one can be frozen to near absolute zero. Every single one can be heated to an excess of boiling, over 304 degrees Fahrenheit. Every single one can withstand 6,000 pounds of pressure and have that pressure reversed instantaneously and still live and do well. Every single one can be bombarded with X-rays 250 times. You see, there's no environment like that. They did not evolve to match that environment. Tardigrades are a problem to evolutionists because you can only survive as the fittest in the environment you're in. You cannot, by evolution, be over-designed. There is only one that can over-design, and he did. His name is God. His name is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the creator. Jesus Christ made water bears. He made tardigrades, these little critters here, and he over-designed them. Who knows? Maybe on purpose so that we could look at them and say, well, evolution clearly is fallacious. It's ridiculous. This is not a survival of the fittest. This is a design creature that is way over-designed. Thank you. They're really a part of our fellowship. They're part of our Sunday night fellowship. And he said to me a while back, he says, you know, you guys could use a little more excitement. And so you would have loved that. We sung that at night for him. He'll be here tonight probably if he gets back from Youth Haven Ministries in time. But we've never done it with the hand motions at night, so we'll have to get fancy. Maybe tonight if he's here. Ancient man. I was going to say old man, but that would, I'm getting too close to that. We went up in the mountains yesterday, and somebody asked me, why do they call that the old man in the mountains? And I said, well, because he's been there a long time. Kind of like, when I started thinking, kind of like me. I've been here a long time, too. Ancient man. We think in evolutionary terms without even realizing it. You think that because you're a part of the modern world, and we have computers and all that kind of stuff, and we have telescopes and things, you think that we are the ones that understand astronomy, perhaps. Would you be surprised to find out that there were some ancient people that understood astronomy pretty well? This kind of blows me away. I think this is super. The Mayans, you know, down in South America, the Mayans built buildings as big as the pyramids out in Egypt. They never seem to get credit for it. I guess because the jungle has overtaken them and you hardly ever see them. But what were some of these pyramids for? We knew they did some very evil things on some of their stuff. But the Mayans of Central South America actually knew that the solar year was 365.2420 days long. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I know it's a little more than 365 days for the solar year, but they were able to figure out, without electricity, without laptop computers, without desktop computers, without slide rules, they were able to figure out that the solar year was 365.2420 days long. That's awesome. That's absolutely astounding to me. Using nothing but, I don't even know if they had pencils. I don't know what they figured out with. She said in China they still learn to use the, what do you call it, the abacus? And I guess you can calculate quite a bit with that little gadget.
Calculate a lot with that.
Can you? I don't know how to. I've seen one. I had an advisor in college when I got my master's at RPI. My physics advisor was Chinese. And he had one. And fortunately never asked me to use it, but he had one on his desk. I think just kind of fooling around with it. But it's amazing. Not only that, they knew about Mars. How they were able to identify Mars, I'm not sure. But catch this. You reading a Mayan book called the Dresden Codex, which goes way, way, way back before Christ, a long time before Christ. They knew that Mars had a synodic period of 780 days. That's the, I'm not even sure what the synodic period means. Okay, the orbit as seen from Earth is a synodic period. The orbit as seen from Earth. I'm not into astronomy a whole lot. Well, the Mayans figured that out, that Mars had a 780-day orbit. They did that without telescopes, without desktop computers, without notebook computers. They did that without calculators, without anything. And you know what the modern date, the time is for that? 779.94 days. That's incredible. Using computers and the technology we have now, we've refined that number just a teeny weeny bit. But this is back before Christ. Back before Christ. They were able to calculate the orbit of Mars right down to within, my goodness, 6/100ths of a day. Isn't that amazing? That blows me away. What that tells me is, and what it's telling these people, this is from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, by the way, and it's astounding to them. How could these people be so intelligent, so close to their ape ancestor? Yeah. We should have evolved a lot more intelligence than that. I'm not sure, quite frankly, today, that if you took away all the computer stuff, and you took away the telescope, and you took everything else away, I'm not sure how many people today could come up with that. Think about it. Once again, everything that we see, that we learn about the world around us, don't be afraid to study the world around you. You're all looking at the same data. If you're in school, you're going to have to feed back the evolutionary stuff, obviously. Remember that. My daughter went through that in college. She took a course in evolution, and she just simply got an A in evolution. The professor knew she was a creationist, but she still got an A in evolution because she understood evolution, and she reported it back to him. But everything that we see, the data that we have, even though we perceive it, we filter it a little bit differently, leans towards man not getting smarter. I'm not going to go the other way. I'm not going to say that we're getting dumber. But I'm just saying, nothing we see leans towards us getting smarter. It leans towards, or points towards, everything that we have here, they had here. There is nothing that we can perceive in our study of anthropology and natural history that even hints that ancient man was dumber than us. This is mind-boggling. It really is. That long before Christ, the Mayans could even know there was a Mars. Never mind calculate the, what do they call it? Calculate the synodic period. That's the orbit as seen from Earth. Amazing. Human beings were created by God in the image of God, fully intelligent. The truth is, Adam was far more intelligent. He named every animal. Far more intelligent than we are. Blows me away. Think about that. Think about the Mayans. Next time you see the Incas or something on National Geographic, and think about what they did with their stuff and how they did it with so little information, and how much they knew and how intelligent they were, and how much that supports your position that you're created by God. Thank you. Waiting for the electronics technician back in. Yesterday, my son and I were out working in our wood lot. I was doing most of the work, but he actually does most of the sawing and carrying of the heavy stuff, and I carry the brush off. But he was saying to me, "What do you think, Dad? Is global warming? Are we facing something like that?" Because it's fairly warm. I don't know if you noticed. This is February, and we were working yesterday in our T-shirts outside, and we were warm. I mean, that is kind of bizarre. And I don't know, global warming, who knows? We haven't set any records yet, I guess, as far as temperature. The temperature has gone up and down for a long period of time. We know that at one time, dinosaurs lived in the North Pole, or mammoths anyway, lived up in the North Pole and South Pole. We know that. So the Earth was a lot warmer back then, and the Earth has a built-in climate control to it. But it got me thinking, there's an article in the latest Creation magazine about caring for our planet. Now, there are wackos on both sides of the issue. As a creationist, I think, it's important that we understand where we are supposed to be. So this is a little bit of a different creation moment. I'm not going to try to prove or disprove evolution this morning, or prove or prove creation, but just talk about our responsibilities as Christians within the creation, because we've gotten bad press from some. There is the wacko idea that since this is a fallen world and God's going to destroy it in flames anyway, why bother to build on it? Right? Well, you don't know when that's going to be. There were people that thought that way back, and Paul had to speak to them at the time of the writing of the Scripture. There were people that weren't working. That's why Paul said, if you don't work, you don't eat. They were sitting around waiting for the second coming. Most of the things that were built back then have just rotted away anyway. So no, it's okay for us to build on things. That's one position. You shouldn't even worry about the earth at all. You know, you want to burn something, you want to burn down the rainforest, go ahead. Doesn't matter, because God's going to destroy the country anyway, the planet anyway. And there actually is a magazine called, where did I see that? I forgot where I saw that. It's, I don't know. I can't remember now. In here somewhere, there's a magazine. It's published by a far-out Christian group that basically takes that tact. Don't worry about the earth. Now, there's the other extreme. There's the wacko extreme that the earth is more important than people. See, that's not a biblical position either. You have to find Christians on the left side thinking that, well, don't worry about anything. If you want to build a factory, go ahead. Don't worry about it because God's in control. You're not apt to find a Christian on the other wacko extreme side, which is that people don't matter. As a matter of fact, there's the guy, Pete Singer. Pete Singer, I've mentioned him before. He's an evolutionist, teaches at Princeton University. He's a professor. And he says, and they say this is kind of silly, but it's totally consistent for an evolutionist, there is no ethical basis for elevating one species higher than another. We all stand on equal footing, whether we stand on 2 feet, 4 feet, or no feet. Like a little snake. Right? Well, that's an extreme. That's a ridiculous extreme. If Pete Singer goes so far as to say that we would be better off to do our testing of dangerous chemicals on people in prison than on animals. So he is being consistent that people are not as valuable or any more valuable than animals, and actually they take it to the other extreme. People are not as valuable. A guy named Lynn White, a professor, a philosopher, wrote a book and said the ecological crisis that we face is caused by the Christian view. Did you know that? Do you know people are blaming you as Christians for the world, the shape the world's in? But here's a guy, an ecologist named René Dubois. He's a humanist, atheist, in 1972 wrote a book that says, actually, we need to be honest. Christians and the Judeo-Christian concept these are the Christians and those who follow Judeo-Christian concepts were the first people to actually care for the environment. On a large-scale concern for land management comes out of Christianity and Judaism. Now, why is that? That's the biblical position. The biblical position, although you have been given lordship, if you will, or rule, as the Scripture says, over God's creation, that doesn't mean He told you to destroy it. So the biblical position fits very nicely into the present ecological movement, if you will, in the middle of it, not off to either extreme. The biblical position is that since you and I believe that God made this earth, and since God turned over the rulership of this earth to us, that we ought to care for it. Lori went away this weekend, and she gave Janine temporary lordship over her 2 rats and 2 cats that live in her house. That does not mean that Lori wanted Janine to go in and shoot the 2 rats and the 2 cats, as tempting as that sometimes may be. It means that she put Janine in control to make sure that the 2 rats and 2 cats were very healthy when she got home, and you did that, and they were very healthy. And I guess Esther helped feed the 2 rats and 2 cats that Lori had, and 2 horses. That's what lordship means. Biblical lordship is that God has given us this earth to actually protect and take care of. We should use responsible, ecological, if you want to say that, use that word, means to do that. Because we believe that God created this, we should not be the people that are accused of destroying it haphazardly. So we should be concerned somewhat, obviously, about the environment. And once again, although many evolutionists see us as the enemy, there are some honest evolutionists, and this guy's an atheist that says, hey, let's face it, the first people to show concern for the environment were biblical Christians. I think that's pretty neat. Thank you. That's what the title of this one is. Now, this is actually an extinct rat. You've heard me say many times that design is evidence for creation. And of course, if design is evidence for creation, then by logical reasoning, it is evidence against evolution. Well, this is, I don't know how I'm going to be able to show the picture, but I'll put it on the table back there. And as you go out, you can look at it. Here's something that an evolutionist picked up, and he said, this is obviously evidence against design. He calls it a faulty design. What it is, it's an extinct rat. It's an Australian giant rat kangaroo, and its major biting tooth, it's called P3, you don't need to know that, but its major molar is supported by what they call a baby tooth, P2, underneath it. He says, therefore, since the major biting molar is supported by a baby tooth, and it is more logical to support that major biting molar with bone instead of a baby tooth, this is evidence for evolution. Now, as soon as a creationist tries something like that, you'll get what I heard recently. Well, all you come up with is negative arguments against evolution. How about something positive for creation? Well, now they've done the same thing, and it seems to be acceptable. Huh? Well, anyway, it depends on which side of the war you're on.
A lot of people born in a country that have teeth like that.
Well, anyway. But anyway, is this evidence of poor design? And what is it that makes something a good design? And who in the world is this evolutionary biologist to say that that's a bad design? Could he do a better job designing the Australian kangaroo rat? Just because something is not designed the way he would like to see it does not mean that it's not a good design. What is proof of a good design? If you want a machine that walks, then it had better walk. Whether it looks just exactly right or not is not the issue, whether it's pretty or not pretty. The fact that it can walk like a robot, what matters is that it can move. If you want a machine that can roll down the highway, quite frankly, it doesn't matter what the body shape of it is. What matters is that the little pistons in the engine go up and down, and that they are somehow connected to a set of driving wheels, and that you have enough driving wheels so that they all can roll and move you down the highway. That's a good design. So what is the purpose? Well, it turns out this evolutionist himself admits that there has never been a harder biting jaw than the jaw, pound for pound, of this little kangaroo rat. That major P3 molar, supported by P2 baby tooth, can bite harder than any other designed thing. He said, actually, there's nothing that can match it. Doesn't that sound like a pretty good design? If its purpose is to bite, and bite it did, and bite hard it did, then I would say it was pretty well designed. If God chose to support P3 with P2, with a major molar, with another tooth underneath it, then so be it. It worked. It worked beautifully. Actually, probably quite a bit better than a bone fragment would work there. So there you have it. I just wanted to share this with you. I often use design as evidence for creation. I still use this design as evidence for creation. Why? Because it worked, and worked very well. Or as Ken Ham likes to say, it does what it's designed to do, and it does it very well indeed. And this little rat did it. Thank you.